Yeah. Wild times. Just wild. Like, what a fun time to be alive.
It just feels different. I have to tell you. I don't know what's coming, but it's at least delightful not to know what to think.
Yeah.
Right? The cynicism that was required to understand what was going on 2 months ago is now no longer required. You actually have to think about what you're told is coming down the pike and think, well, I don't know, is that a solution? Is it a negotiating tactic, or is it a solution that's actually being proposed, and would it work? And
right. Like, are we really taking over Gaza, or is this just a bullshit marketing ploy? Like, what is this, like some negotiation tactic with Israel? Like, what? Because, like, the look on Netanyahu's face when Trump was talking about taking over Gaza, it was like, what? You could see his face. He was just like, what the fuck are you saying?
I have to say, I almost feel like it was worth the price of admission right there.
Just to watch his face? Yeah, like, look, you want to let us in? Oh, you want us help? Okay, we're going to set up bases there. And instead of, someone was describing this on Twitter, instead of a response time to any action Israel taking days, it takes minutes.
Well, I am not a fan of Netanyahu's, as you probably know. My sense is that the relationship of Netanyahu to the Israeli population is more or less like the Biden administration to the U.S. population.
Well, they were even
not on the same team.
Even more against it because they were protesting in the street, hundreds of thousands of people up until October 7th. That was one of the reasons apparently why they think they got their pants down, or they got caught with their pants down on October 7th, because they had so many troops that were around these protests. So they had hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the streets because Netanyahu was trying to expand his powers.
And this just so happened to put him back in charge. But in any case, to see him back on his heels, that was a good sign. Now, I am, of course, concerned about the idea of, I'm not even sure I know what I heard, right? We're going to make Gaza into...
Going to be the Riviera of the Middle East.
That was a pretty good impression.
The Riviera of the Middle East. Oh my God. What a crazy time. And just to see all these politicians freaking out, that is amazing too. It's really amazing. It's amazing to watch. It's amazing to watch all these left-wing people suddenly, Bernie Sanders making a post about how Donald Trump is trying to silence independent media was the wildest fucking gaslighting I think I've ever seen from a politician. Independent media? You mean fucking CBS? You mean CBS that edited that Kamala Harris interview to make it look like she had a really good point?
100%. And then I don't know if you caught Alex Soros reposting this claim that basically you have an unelected cabal wielding power. I mean, that's
you.
Yeah,
that's you, Alex. That's your dad. This is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very strange historical moment.
Also, it's like, you haven't addressed any of the exposed corruption. All you're talking about is the horrors of dismantling this amazing organization. What about all the shit that they've uncovered? There's not even a counter argument. Like, no, we need to fund gender fluid dance in fucking Turkey. like, what are you talking about? We need $200 million for Starbucks Keurig cups. What?
Well, I mean, again, I said a lot of stuff over the years about the fact that our civilization had become a racket.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were living in the era of malignant governance, and that basically I'm concerned as somebody who believes in good governance that there's almost no component of this that you couldn't remove and create an improvement, that's not a message you want. Right. I want a message in which we govern as lightly as possible, but we do it really, really well. And an era in which you can cut off any limb and the patient gets healthier, that teaches the wrong lesson about governance. It teaches the lessons that governance was a mistake to begin with, which it wasn't.
Right.
So
Well, how do we get money out of governance? So that's the problem, right? Is money gets involved in governance, especially enormous amounts of money, and then they have influence. And then you have senators and congressmen and different elected representatives that don't do the will of the people. They do the will of the people that paid them enormous amounts of money. And this is a real problem. Because if it was just the only way you could win was you had to do for the will of the people. You had to literally do things that were better for the people. The people realize you're doing a great job and they keep electing you.
Well, let's be honest about what the conservatives had right from the get-go. There are problems that only competition solves. There are other problems that competition in something like a market is not well positioned to solve, but there's certain problems that there's no second best. It's only competition that works. And so when we talk about, well, what are we going to do for fact checking? We're going to abandon the idea of fact checking. What you want is a vibrant, independent journalist sector in which people who spot the story early and people who articulate the story in the most intuitive and accurate way outcompete those who do a worse job, so that over time what we get is journalism that you can't fool.
Right.
And that it reveals to us which government programs actually work, even if they don't sound reasonable at first glance. Here's what's really going on behind the scenes in this program, right? And then journalism that exposes any kind of fraud. And I don't know about you, but as I was watching confirmation hearings, my sense was that the Elizabeth Warrens and the Bernie Sanders were dinosaurs who do not understand that the Earth has just been hit from outer space and that they don't live in the world that they are so used to. That their corruption was immediately apparent. And they're not used to that. They're used to having a whole phony journalistic layer that covers for them.
Right.
And that layer is gone, and the American public is awake, and it's angry, and rightfully so. And now it looks at Bernie Sanders, who, I remember the first time you and I spoke, you and I had both been Sanders supporters.
Yeah.
And now to see that same guy going after Bobby Kennedy, and, the feeble excuse, well, what if Bobby Kennedy becomes the head of HHS and people don't have access to prescription drugs? And it's like, dude, I just lived through COVID. It's not obvious to me that they wouldn't get healthier if they didn't have access to prescription drugs. Do you realize how corrupt those companies are and how nonsensical their science is? The science that says that you actually get better if you take a statin based on some metric in your chart, right? So I'm not arguing that there aren't good pharmaceuticals. There undoubtedly are. But what's the net effect of our pharmaceutical-obsessed medical culture? It's not obvious to me that it's positive. I think it may well be negative. And so anyway, again, I see Bernie Sanders and I see him reading from a script that is no longer relevant to the movie we're watching.
Right, and this is not saying that there aren't some pharmaceutical drugs that are amazing. The problem is they're not all amazing. And they sell them all like they're amazing.
Absolutely.
That's the problem. Some of them are great. Like Viagra is fantastic. Like it's really good stuff. There's a bunch of stuff like that really works. There's a bunch of drugs that really help people. There's a bunch of drugs that brilliant scientists have developed that definitely help people live longer and live healthier lives. But also, they're in the business of selling medicine, selling pharmaceutical drugs. And so there's a lot of stuff that they sell that is not good for you. Overall net negative. When you look at the amount of drugs that get pulled, that get endorsed and then supported by the FDA, and then they have to pull them, wasn't it like 30%? Something in the range?